So there has been a scandal at the Pentagon every single day since January 25th. I mean, every single day. Because every day since January 25th, Pete Hegseth has been the Secretary of Defense. And some days, that scandal is more jarring than others. Like today, when the country and the entire world really turned to the Pentagon, tuned in this morning for an update on the outcome of the U.S. strikes on Iran. And instead, they got this meltdown.
In hunting for scandals all the time, in trying to find wedges and spin stories, this press corps and the press corps miss historic moments. Because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it. Classified information is leaked or peddled for political purposes to try to make the president look bad. But just a little portion that makes it seem like maybe the strike wasn't effective. If you want to know what's going on at Fort O, you better go there and get a big shovel.
That was Trump Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who I would note was until recently a Fox News anchor. I don't know what was in his coffee this morning because that took place at 8 a.m. Now, if he had behaved like that on Fox News, even many of their viewers, many of their loyal viewers, might have been alarmed. But he's not a Fox News weekend anchor anymore. He is the Secretary of Defense, and he was speaking from the Pentagon. He was answering questions about a series of recent reports based on intelligence from inside Hegseth's own agency that say Trump's strikes on Iran did not obliterate Iran's nuclear sites like Trump has claimed. Intelligence analysts from the Defense Intelligence Agency, again, the Pentagon's own intelligence arm, said that Saturday's U.S. strike did not destroy Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. And the best question of the day on that reporting came from a former colleague of Secretary Hegseth, Fox News reporter Jennifer Griffin.
Do you have certainty that all the highly enriched uranium was inside the Fordo mountain, or some of it, because there were satellite photos that showed more than a dozen trucks there 2 days in advance? Are you certain none of that highly enriched uranium was moved?
That is kind of the question right now. It is the question. And the satellite imagery she's referencing from days before the U.S. strike shows a line of 16 cargo trucks, you can see it right there on the screen, lines up at the entrance to the underground nuclear site the U.S. bombed. But it's not even just the photos, which everybody can see. Earlier this week, 2 Israeli officials with knowledge of the matter told the New York Times that they had intelligence that Iran had moved nearly 900 pounds of enriched uranium from the site in the days before the attack. So, are you certain none of the highly enriched uranium was moved is the question of the moment, because it tells us whether or not Iran has materials to continue pursuing a nuclear program. It was a good question. It was the right question. And this is how Pete Hegseth answered that question.
Are you certain none of that highly enriched uranium was moved?
Of course, we're watching every single aspect. But, Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally.
I should say Jennifer Griffin is a tough reporter. I've been on the other end of that. And she's one person who relentlessly presses every administration because that's her job, whether they're Republicans in power or Democrats in power. It's, of course, actually Secretary Hegseth who has been misrepresenting things intentionally for months now. And this is all seems to be a part of a desperate attempt to avoid actually answering questions about the military strikes last week. And that kind of evasiveness is a hallmark of his time at the Pentagon. It's not a one-off this morning. I mean, just a week after being sworn in, Hegseth kicked the New York Times, NBC News, NPR, and Politico out of their Pentagon offices because he did not want these reputable, hard-hitting news organizations to have as much easy access to the building. And back in April, a former advisor of Hegseth went on Megyn Kelly's show and talked about his genuine concern about Pete Hegseth, given how obsessed he'd become with leaks.
Do you think he's okay? Do you think Pete is okay?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not sure. He was very focused on the leaks. And honestly, I think it's kind of like consumed the team a little bit. Like if you looked at a pie chart of the secretary's day, at this point, 50% of it's probably leak investigation press. Like it's that, and like that can't be. That is a bad thing.
I mean, 50% of his time on leaks, he's the Secretary of Defense. And one of his closest staffers said, I'm not sure if he's okay. And that interview, by the way, was before we bombed Iran, long before. I think it's safe to say he's only become more obsessed with leaks and pushing the media out, and less okay since then. But what's clear is that Pete Hegseth will say and basically do anything to keep the boss happy. I mean, even this morning, it seemed like Hegseth was speaking less to the American public or the reporters in the room or his counterparts around the world, and more like he was kind of speaking to an audience of one. And this morning, Pete Hegseth knew exactly what the assignment was. I mean, maybe Trump even told him directly. And Trump has spent the past few days calling for journalists who reported on U.S. intelligence to be fired, some of them by name, because that intelligence says his strike was not as successful as he claims. And he probably knew that he could get at least a few of his lackeys to go out there and do his bidding. Last night and this morning, Trump even promoted Hegseth's press conference, posted about it, which is not something he normally does, saying that the fake news had been lying and Hegseth would tell the truth. And then at today's press conference, Hegseth didn't provide evidence that the strike had successfully destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities, because perhaps it doesn't exist. But he did aggressively attempt to shift the definition of success. That seemed to be part of his goal as well, maybe a directed goal, who knows. As the New York Times put it, the briefing gave no new assessments of the state of Iran's nuclear program or the damage to the sites. Instead, the briefing focused on the planning and execution of those strikes. That is a classic case of moving the goalposts. Doesn't matter anymore if we destroyed anything. According to Pete Hegseth, what matters was how well planned it all was. To give you a little reminder, though, of where the goalposts used to be just a few days ago, on Sunday after the strikes, Vice President J.D. Vance declared that we were not at war with Iran, but that we were at war with Iran's nuclear program. Literally, that was his quote. Got it. So the idea was not to start a war with Iran, but to destroy Iran's enriched uranium and prevent the country from being able to build a nuclear weapon. That was the stated goal by the Vice President of the United States on Sunday 4 days ago. Here's what Republican senators said today.
It's not part of the mission to destroy all their enriched uranium or to seize it or anything else.
I don't know where the 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium exists, but it wasn't part of the target set.
I have no idea what you're talking about. None of them do, it seems, at this point. See, the Republican Party line here is that whatever Trump did was the right decision, even if it was different from what he was saying yesterday. Whatever intelligence there is about what actually happened or whatever our previously stated goals used to be, that doesn't matter. They'd rather keep moving the goalposts and kind of gaslight all of us rather than respond to the facts. And they've been following the direction of their leader since this whole thing started.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
Back in March, Trump director of national intelligence, what they're referring to, which you probably all remember, but she told the Senate Intelligence Committee that the U.S. intelligence community did not believe that Iran was building a nuclear weapon. Then a few weeks ago, Tulsi Gabbard posted this kind of weird, strange, bizarre, straight-to-camera video on her personal Twitter account. In it, she tells the public that we are, quote, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before because of political elite and warmongers carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. Again, posted on her personal account. I don't know what Tulsi Gabbard knew when she posted that cryptic video or entirely what her goal was, but 3 days later, Israel struck Iran's nuclear sites, starting the back and forth that led to the U.S. strikes. Clearly, Trump was not a fan of whatever intelligence or analysis Tulsi Gabbard had been providing him with. He said so much publicly. But now Gabbard appears to be falling back in line. I mean, yesterday, Gabbard announced that she magically had new intelligence that shows that the U.S. strikes really did destroy Iran's nuclear sites. That new intelligence very conveniently contradicts the assessment Trump has been so mad about all week. Now, new data means analysis can change, and the intelligence on this matter is evolving. But the thing is, Tulsi Gabbard has a huge credibility problem here for a range of reasons, including the fact that back in March, Trump claimed that a Venezuelan gang was perpetrating an invasion of the United States at the direction of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. That claim, that a foreign government was invading the United States, was the legal basis Trump needed to invoke the Alien Enemies Act and deport people without due process. That's what they were leaning into. But there was a huge problem. That claim wasn't true. In May, a declassified intelligence report contradicted Trump's claim, saying that the U.S. spy agencies did not think Venezuela's president controlled this gang at all. A few weeks later, we learned that Gabbard fired the leaders of the intelligence group who wrote that report. Days after that, the New York Times reported that Tulsi Gabbard's top aide had ordered intelligence analysts to rewrite the report to make it look better for Trump. All that was reported just last month. And now, a couple weeks later, we are supposed to believe that Tulsi Gabbard, the same person I just described, suddenly has magical new intelligence that says exactly what Trump wants it to say and contradicts the previous U.S. intelligence assessment from a few days ago. Look, Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard are uniquely unqualified for the incredibly serious and important roles they have. Their behavior can be so bizarre at times, it is almost funny. But the stakes here couldn't be higher. So the facts matter and the people in charge matter. And whatever we saw this morning was a lot of things from Pete Hegseth, but it definitely wasn't what the American people deserve when we just use military strikes in a foreign country. And it certainly wasn't the truth either.
President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history.
Move over, D-Day. Pete Hegseth would like a word. Maybe he's not exactly a historian either.